I'm gonna level with all of you. I truly thought that this was going to be an incredibly boring, newsless week when it came to news on film, and it has ended up being such a stacked week for movie news that I actually had to take off things from my planned show rundown to make sure this doesn't get a little bit too ridiculous. Anyhow, welcome to the fourth episode of the Mendez Movie Report Podcast, covering film news that caught my interest for the week of May 18th, 2026. I'm your host and namesake film critic Louis A. Mendez. If you want to check out more of my work, you can visit mendezmoviereport.com or find me on all social media, whether it be Letterboxd, X, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, Reddit, or even Award Expert and Gold Derby under Mendez Movie RPT. And yes, there's still no intro. I am telling you right now, it is my goal to get this damn intro done, but unfortunately, we're probably gonna have to wait a couple weeks more until I can give you all an intro. But we are underway here for this fourth episode, as we have now entering close to the end of May now, and what has now been about a month since I've decided to go ahead and take the gamble and start this podcast, and it is a stacked episode that we got ready for you here. I will be talking about Obsession, the movie that's ended up being the movie of the weekend, the movie that some people think has the potential to potentially be the next Hereditary, except hopefully with better awards conversations. Everybody loves this movie. Well, everybody except me, so I'll be giving my dissenting thoughts on the movie. The Camp Film Festival kicked off, and we are 1 week in, and there is already a lot of headlines happening. Conan O'Brien will be coming back to host the Oscars for a third straight year. Alfie Williams gives us an update on the 28 Years Later trilogy. Bong Joon-ho has some incredible frank comments about Mickey 17. Film critic Rex Reed passed away. We'll be talking about that. Los Angeles restaurants have a rat problem. And of course, as always, I will be talking about the past weekend at the box office and the next weekend at the box office, on top of a lot of other things. So let's get this episode started. Focus Features and Blumhouse, which I'm really struggling to think of when was the last time that we've seen these two work together. Usually it's Blumhouse and Universal, but Focus Features and Blumhouse teamed up to release to us Obsession, a brand new horror film from Curry Barker, who, believe it or not, is not related to Clive Barker. I actually thought at first when I was hearing about this movie a couple weeks ago that it might have been someone who was related to Clive Barker, but no, Curry Barker actually comes from a YouTube background, which has already been some discourse online about that. I don't mind. I mean, I think it's perfectly natural that we're getting YouTubers involved in trying to take a swing at making movies. Everything Everywhere at Once is a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. That film was directed by two guys who made absurd comedic music video for Turn Down for What. Jordan Peele was doing comedy skits with Keegan Michael Key, and he look at what he's done since then. Nothing but films have been praised by critics. And Steven Spielberg was doing a bunch of made-for-TV cheap films before he did Jaws. So I don't mind that. If YouTubers think that they have something that they want to provide to the film industry, I'm all for it. They get a chance to either fail or not on their own. I don't have a problem with that. But Obsession came out, and look, I didn't get to write a formal review for this. I was kind of hoping to after it started blowing up, but unfortunately, my weekend just got too busy, and I just never got around to it. And the movie didn't screen for us down here in Central Florida, because Focus Features never really does any screenings down here. They either happen to send us a ticket voucher, or they decide, hey, we're going to wait until the end of the year and suddenly send you a bunch of online screeners. But look, I will tell you this: the movie has obviously been a massive hit. It's funny because this movie was actually a movie that came out during the fall festivals last year, before it came out recently, and it ended up being this really big hit, not just with critics but with audiences as well. This movie has really, really strong audience scores. Audience scores that are not common to see for a horror film. I mean, I have to call it like I see it here. Um, these are the kind of audience scores that could potentially get this movie to get some potential awards buzz. Now the question is it Hereditary, where that movie got a lot of buzz? That movie showed up on a lot of best of the year lists. That movie got pushed by critics for its lead performance, and it ended up just making absolutely no splash whatsoever in the industry, much less on Oscar morning. Or is it going to be The Substance, where that movie ended up just gaining this incredible word of mouth, a lot of passion, critics pushed it, and before you knew it, it was a Best Picture nominated film that came close to winning Best Actress. Um, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but I do think it's in play. I can see a WGA nom, I can see a DGA debut nomination. I mean, there's enough passion here that depending on how things turn out, I can see maybe a kind of fun lead actress nom here. Maybe makeup or something like that, which is usually what horror is kind of regulated to at the Oscars. But the last couple of years have been different. There has been an opening up to horror on the awards front. I mean, Nosferatu was moderately close to getting to Best Picture when The Substance got in. Last year, we got the first ever lineup with two horror films in it, with Sinners and Frankincense. And Sinners almost won Best Picture, even while being a straight up supernatural horror film. Uh, Now, that all being said, what did I think of the movie? This has been getting great critical reviews, great audience reviews. Well, I have to tell you, every now and then as a critic you have to face the fact that you just don't vibe with the overall reception that the movie has gotten. And I'm sorry to say I cannot join the bandwagon on this one. Now look, if the movie keeps getting a lot of like serious awards consideration, I might have no other choice but to actually watch it again at the end of the year, just to give it another try. Now, do I think I'm gonna end up loving it to the point I've seen other people do? No, but maybe I'll rewatch it as time has passed, and I'll have some different perspective by then, and I'll end up at least being fairly positive on the film. It wouldn't be the first time that that's happened. But look, I this film has an incredibly interesting premise where this young man, he really, really likes this girl, but he doesn't have the confidence. The movie actually does some subtle hints that she might actually be into him, but he feels like he's being rejected by her and decides to do. Basically, he gets like this wishing willow sort of thing where he gets to make a wish, and he makes a wish that he basically wants this girl to be into him. Well, the thing is that the way he words it is really like he's all that matters to her. He's all, and you kind of see the real life horror, what it would be like if someone only cared 100% about that person. Look, everyone who has had relationships knows that you can't be around that person 100% of the time. You can't be devoting everything to that person 100% of the time. It's not healthy. A and B, at the end of the day, you're your own person. I'm as big a hopeful romantic as there is, but at the end of the day, everyone's their own person, and you can't be 100% just doing everything together, always obsessed with each other and stuff like that. This movie takes that fact and takes it to a whole other level of where it becomes. It's almost like, what would happen if your significant other turned out to be this complete pixie manic psycho? And I think that premise is interesting, and I will say that the performances in here do not hold back. They do not hold back whatsoever. The lead actress in this has been getting a ton of love. I don't have her name in front of me. I know it's in the starts with an N. Unfortunately, as I'm recording this right now, I don't have her name in front of me. But this has got a potential big breakout role for her. She is really good in the movie. I can see why there's a real big push now. Where I mean, she could end up being Amy Madigan from last year. I don't think necessarily win wise, but at least nomination wise. So you know, I think that's driving a lot of love for this movie. My issue with the movie, why I'm not vibing with it as much as others are, is that I do feel, and I had this issue with Send Help. I feel like it's kind of this. I feel like it's a mean-spirited movie more than an entertaining horror film. And there is a fine line when it comes to these horror movies of mean-spiritedness and being entertained by being scared or shocked. And and granted, the movie does have this sort of like dark comedic tone to it that it tries to go for, which is I don't have a problem with that. You campy horror goes all the way back to freaking Bride of Frankenstein from 1935. That's arguably the most respected horror film of all time. But it's not the tone's actually not my issue with the movie. My issue with the movie is just that it just comes out very mean spirited. And the big thing is that we're supposed to see this young lady as the victim, basically, because she's basically has no autonomy and control of her own thoughts and what she wants to do. And I mean, let's just get it out there in the open. There is arguably sexual assault in this movie. Like if you're wishing someone to be more into you than they are, which includes getting intimate, that's basically rape. I mean, like let's say it how it is. So it does create. You're supposed to feel sorry for our for the young lady, for the female. I guess you could say female interest in this, female lead. But the problem is that the lead guy in this, and I think the character's name was Bear. He they portray things in a way where I found myself feeling sorry for him in some way, because and I don't think I was supposed to, because what he did is really screwed up. Like I will never ever understand. I've always had this thing where I would rather someone be into me than forcing them to be with me. And especially over the last couple years, as I've gone through some things in my personal life, that's only become stronger and stronger for me. And this movie, I'm supposed to feel revolted by Bear, the lead character who did this wish. But the problem is that the way things are shown in this movie, well, we all know, we all have gone through unrequited love. We all know about that pain of like really being into someone, wanting to date them, wanting to get to know them in that level, and they don't have any interest. And particularly for us guys, because us guys, we have to deal with a lot of like we have to deal with the pressures of you have to do the wooing, you have to do the going after the girl and all that stuff. So there's almost like this extra pressure there. But there is like what he's does as done here is fucked up. This is this whole like love potion number 9 kind of thing is usually shown in media as something that villains do to a woman. And what happens is that I end up kind of feeling sorry for him at times because of how things are clearly deteriorating, how this is not turning out the way he is, which there is something to be said about the move what the movie's trying to show, in that you wish for something and it doesn't turn out the way that you think it is, or what you're wishing for, you don't understand the can of worms that you're opening up, or what this actually looks like in the real terror, in terms of like the kind of fucked up thing that this guy is deciding to wish for, forcing a girl to like him and date him and sleep with him and stuff like that. So I think the movie could have done a better job on that. And on top of that, I just felt like the finale to this was a mess. It was I did not dig I did not dig the finale to this. And so ultimately I just did not enjoy this film. I ended up just it's bad when you get to the final act and you start looking at your watch Um, and look, I'll be the first to say it. The critic and audience scores do not lie. People really have connected to this movie. This movie's going to show up on some best of the year lists. I can already tell that this is probably going to be a movie that will show up on some critics' best of, excuse me, on some regional groups' best picture lineups. I absolutely could see this being an Astros nominee too for best picture. Um, so, maybe I'm taking crazy pills. Someone online suggested, and then not in a mean way, in a helpful way, actually, that maybe me becoming a dad recently has made me a little bit turned off to this kind of stuff. But I don't know. I mean, like, I did really enjoy 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. That movie at the moment is on track to potentially make my best of the year list, and if it doesn't, it'll barely not get in. Um, so maybe that has something to do with it, but I think at the end of the day, I had trouble vibing with this film. So for me, it's a C minus. I just straight up did not enjoy this movie. I was very frustrated by it. But hey, again, it maybe it's just a me thing. I don't think I'll it's interesting because typically there are times that I get kind of frustrated when a movie I don't like gets a lot of like love. I mean, heck, I got super greedy during the 2024 Oscar season and started to kind of sound like I was more anti Honora than I was. And Honora was actually one of my favorite films of that year. But you start getting involved in the awards race and you get greedy. Um, but I don't feel like a frustration that I'm out of the loop on this compared to everybody else. No, if it starts freaking being a top five best picture contender, I might start getting be a little insufferable on social media about it. But I mean, I don't know what else to say. Horror can be very your mileage may vary. It's acquired. Everybody has a different perspective on can have different perspectives on a horror movie. But I am going to have to dissent on this one, and say that unfortunately, I did not enjoy Obsession. In fact, Obsession is of all the big box office releases of the last month or so, I would say Obsession is actually my least favorite. The Cannes Film Festival kicked off this past week, and we are officially halfway through it as I record this, with another week to go until the prestigious Palme d'Or, or the Golden Palm, is handed out to the jury's choice for Festival Film of the Year. There were some early fireworks at the opening press conference. You did have the festival's longtime general delegate, Thierry Fremox. I always have trouble pronouncing this guy's name. Look, he's known for making statements that grab the press's attention and he claimed at this press conference that last year's Best Picture Oscar winner, which just so happens to be my favorite film of last year as well, one battle after another, was actually planned to premiere at Cannes before being delayed at the last second for post-production touch-ups. And look, given that Paul Thomas Anderson has never really been the biggest film festival guy, which is kind of funny considering that this dude, I believe he's the only director who's ever won a directing prize at all the major festivals and the Oscars. But he hasn't premiered a film at one of these festivals in some time now. So I don't know how much I can buy that story. But it would have been wild for Cannes to claim back to back Best Picture winners premiering at the festival. He also said that he's been working to restore some trust with major studios in hopes of getting them to return to Cannes to premiere their films there. The festival did recently host the premiere of Top Gun Maverick. You saw what happened with that movie that was well received at the time. But the thing is that these big movies can get the visit receptions from these con crowds. Elemental, I remember, received very mixed responses out of the festival, and then it went on to be a box office success. It connected strongly with audiences, earned Oscar nomination. This year, Cannes did not have any major studio films in competition or even just to show. Um, and I think there is a situation now where, with the Indiana Jones movie and how that kind of flopped, Inside Out 2 kind of came and went at Con. I think there's a lot of studios are just feeling like it's not worth it to go ahead and premiere at Con. I think that's unfortunate. I think, like, for instance, I think it would have been cool if Disclosure Day showed up at Con. I mean, it's kind of wild that we are less than a month away from a new Steven Spielberg, and it doesn't feel like it. I think that's a little bit weird. Um, Other fireworks came from the jury's opening press conference. Jury President Park Chan-wook defended the relationship between art and politics. And he said, quote, "I think it's a strange concept to think that they're in conflict with each other. Just because a work of art has a political statement, it should not be considered an enemy of art. At the same time, just because a film is not making a political statement, that film should not be ignored." And all I can say is, voila. This is the kind of stuff that leads to the worst extremes of cinephile behaviors, or even in some cases film criticism, where there's this group that seems to only want to be entertained. They don't want to think too much, or be challenged too much by these movies. And yet there's also this other group that seems to look down on movies that are entertaining, just because they don't have anything big to say. uh, Meanwhile, screenwriter Paul Laverty went after Hollywood during the press conference over what he described as the blackballing of celebrities who supported efforts to stop the war in Gaza, saying Khan had a wonderful poster of Thelma and Louise. Isn't it fascinating to see some of them, like Susan Sarandon, Javier Bardem, and Mark Ruffalo, blacklisted because of their views in opposition of the murder, opposing the murder of women and children in Gaza. Um, and I will say that it is interesting that they have the Thelma and Louise as their big poster this year at Cannes. Demi Moore also gave a very awkward and stumbly defense of AI that I'm not going to even go ahead and quote. That has sparked a bunch of discourse on X. Stellan Skarsgård apparently revealed that he recently suffered a stroke, and apparently was joking about how it related to him walking up and down all these stairs at the festival. I know that Jacob Elordi had to pull out of potentially being in the jury because of he claims because of a broken foot, but apparently people have been seeing him hanging out with the Jenners. So I don't know what that's about. And it seems as expected, at this point, Chloe Zhao probably delivered the warmest and least controversial remarks of the bunch, talking about how excited she was to be serving on the same jury as Park Chan-wook. As for how the Cannes Film Festival is shaping up halfway through, it does seem like those concerns that I mentioned a couple weeks back, that this wasn't quite as stacked a lineup as a lot of people around me were hyping it up. I think they kind of have been coming to fruition so far. We got a bunch of movies that I would have put on my board for potential Best Picture contenders, and they're really dropping like flies. We got a new film from Hirokazu Kurata, known by some as the modern day Jasuyu Ozu, uh, which I'm not sure I agree with that comparison, but it's a hell of a comparison to make. But he's got a new movie, Sheep in the Box, only received 3-minute standing ovation. I mean, somebody on social media said this is like getting booed at Con, and they have a point. 3 minutes by ovation by a Con crowd is pretty pathetic. Um, Meanwhile, celebrated director Ashghar Farhadi's newest film, Parallel Tales, which is actually a French film, even though it's Iranian, and he's been known for making some great Iranian films. That movie completely bombed, earning just 5 minutes of polite applause. And I've been noticing that the reviews for that movie, at least last that I checked, are scoring worse than Mortal Kombat 2. Hope, Nahan Jean's creature feature space invasion movie, premiered to an extremely mixed reception, with some critics noting that would appear to be unfinished CGI in the cut that was screened. James Gray's period thriller Paper Tiger received a very divided response. The highlights of the festival so far seem to be, I had written here 2 well-received international films, but it looks like it's now potentially 3, from previous Oscar-nominated directors. Paul Powell Palaskowski's Fatherland and Rusuke Hamaguchi's All of a Sudden. Critics appear to love both films, so the early curves on movie logging sites for festival goers who tend to be a little closer to general audiences seem notably less enthusiastic. And I will also add here that another big film that is contention that got a lot of love is, as I when I wrote this on my weekly digest, we hadn't heard from it reception to it yet. But for your this is a new film from Neon. The rumor is that Neon is hoping to make it their big contender. So apparently they're going to go back to back years trying to push a family drama as their top contender. This movie started Sebastian Stan and Renata Ransva, in which basically I guess the idea is supposed to be that they're a very conservative religious family. They moved some to the Netherlands, I believe, and apparently there's some kind of like some instigating action happens, and the reviews seem to be hinting that it involves a child punishment, in that creates these uncomfortable questions about culture and religion and the way people and parents raising their children. And I will say that the thing about Fatherland all of a sudden for Fjord is that all of these movies have been getting really high score from critics, and I would not be surprised whatsoever if either of these movies end up winning the Palm when I get a report on that in the next episode. But I have to tell you that between Fatherland getting accused of having issues with its pacing, even though the movie's less than 90 minutes long, all of a sudden it's a 3-hour movie. I've seen some people refer to it as lesser Drive My Car, which will be interesting because Drive My Car was one of my favorites of 2021. And then you of course had the situation with Fjord, where I don't know how some audiences are going to respond to a movie with, especially a movie going audience that gravitates to these kind of movies, a movie about right wingers. Apparently, like I don't know how that's going to play with some audiences, especially the Academy. Um, it will be interesting because I've been noticing a trend that audiences have not responded to these movies the way critics have. And con audiences are not the guy who was in my mentions complaining that I didn't like the Mario movie or because I only gave 3 stars to the Michael movie. Like, there's a very particular type of audience we're talking about here. But look, there's also been a lot of love for 2 animated films also that were tackling mature subject matters. There's In Waves, which deals with cancer, Tangles, which focuses on old timers. Meanwhile, the latest film from James Schoenbrunn, Teenage and Death at Camp Miasma, has been met with strong reviews. The horror film aims to subvert the slasher subgenre, but I will say that Jane's work has historically tended to connect more strongly with critics than with broader audiences. So we'll have to see how this one also plays out outside of the festival bubble. And the more I hear from people who have seen the movie, the more I have a feeling that this is going to be like the last 2 movies. It's going to be niche for particular people who are going to lose their minds, put on their best of the year list and stuff like that. And the industry might not touch it one bit. I did not vibe with their previous 2 movies. It'll be interesting to see if maybe I vibe with this one more. But I have to say, as someone who has so far not been on board with this, with their filmography, I don't know if this one's going to be the one, but I'm hopeful. I'll still watch it and give it a shot. Um, and to finish off the Cannes Film Festival coverage, I wanted to note that honors were given to both Peter Jackson for his work as a director. Of course, he gave us the Lord of the Rings film trilogy, the 2005 remake of King Kong, and more recently, some ambitious documentary work focused on World War One and the Beatles. Um, there was a surprise honor that they gave to John Travolta, who was at the festival premiering his directorial debut film, Propeller One Way Night Coach, which will be released on Apple TV Plus in a couple weeks. Look, I've more or less given up that Jackson will deliver another great narrative feature, but he absolutely deserves recognition for the body of work he's given us. And look, it was cool to see Elijah Wood there to give him the award. And as for Travolta, it would honestly be great to see him land another major studio hit. He's been doing a lot of these cheap, straight to stream type of movies that are awful, quite frankly. And look, the guy's gone through some personal tragedies late in his life. I really hope that this movie, which is definitely a movie that seems to be very personal for him, I hope it does well. It seems to be getting mix of positive responses from the people who have seen it, but I'll give it a try. I really hope that John Travolta finds himself in a big studio film again sooner rather than later. Conan O'Brien will be hosting the Academy Awards for a third consecutive time, making that Oscars host for live skit, which is a pretty funny skit, that ended the previous ceremony feel even more remarkable in hindsight. I've really enjoyed O'Brien's work hosting the last two ceremonies, and aside from one joke he made about pretending not to like the 2024 films in this past ceremony, I'm not crazy about that. I've never been a big fan of jokes that are expensive to movies themselves. That's one of the various reasons I was not a fan of the 2021 ceremony. Um, you know, with the exception of that, I think he settled into the role better than most hosts I've seen in my lifetime, quite frankly, especially in the post Billy Crystal era. I honestly can't blame the Academy and ABC for wanting to keep him around. Now, if they could just stop scheduling the ceremony mid March, I'd be okay with that. But yeah, I'm very, very happy and have no complaints about Conan making it 3 years in a row as Oscar. So he hit back-to-back home runs. I think he will do it for a third year in a row. And when we eventually shift from ABC to YouTube hosting the Oscars, I would not have any issue if YouTube wants to talk to Conan about staying on the job. It is kind of crazy to think that it's taken this long for him to be able to host it after so many years of hosting the Emmys. But hey, we finally getting him as Oscar host, and I am very, very happy to see him uh, doing as well as he's done in the role. Alfie Williams seems to hint that the third and final film in the ongoing 28 years later films is going to start pre-production sooner rather than later, regardless of Bone Temple's negative box office. He posted a picture on social media of him learning to and prepping to use a crossbow. And I'll tell you what, the young man has certainly been growing since we saw uh, uh, him on the silver screen. I gotta believe because he's clearly grown into being a teenager. I gotta believe this next film will start with a time skip compared to the last two movies. And 28 years later, what was a pleasant surprise to me as someone who's usually not a big into zombie type of movies. I know technically it's humans infested, but 28 years later, I gave it A-2. It didn't end up on my best of the year list for 2025, but it came pretty close. And 28 years later, The Bone Temple is definitely one of my favorite films of the year so far. We'll see if it makes the best of the year list. To be honest with you, knowing how I am and knowing the way things are probably going to play out the rest of the year, I'll probably just barely miss like the first movie did. But look, they're great movies regardless. Um, and I really hope that they go 3 for 3 with this third one. But I will tell you, I really, really have to say this is without a shadow of a doubt, these movies have been for me the best zombie films that I may have ever seen, and I mean that. Bong Joon-ho recently spoke about his previous film, Mickey 17's box office flop, remarking, "Director's final cut was part of my contract, and everyone at the studio and at my agency tried their best to protect me. Of course, during post production, there were lots of discussions and a lot of opinions going back and forth, but it wasn't ever like someone was forcing something on me or giving me pressure. And so, luckily, all my films have been released as my director's final cut. Even a movie as big as Mickey 17, and all the good parts of that film and all the bad parts of that film came from me. I take full responsibility, so shit on me if you don't like it." I was personally mixed of positive Mickey 17. It honestly might even be my least favorite of all Bong's movies. But look, I do know some folks who defended and loved it, and it was among their favorites of the year. They pushed for it to be nominated for makeup. Um, but Bong making these kind of frank comments tells me he feels perhaps that he should listen to the studio, giving how a film like that. It was always going to be an issue to sell that kind of movie to the public, even after Parasite. And I remember a lot of people were getting there was all this discourse and debate when Mickey 17 came out about the studio and their issues with Bong and the constant delays of that film. And after I saw the movie, it's like I completely get why Warner Brothers was concerned. It's just not a movie that's easy to make commercial. I feel like the second half of the movie is the stronger part of the film. The first half is easily the parts that I have most of the problems with. And this is what happens sometimes when a director can go unchecked. But I'm hopeful Bong's gonna bounce back with this animated film of his that he's got coming up, which should be coming out next year. From Neon Alley, which has a very interesting voice cast and a very interesting premise, if you ask me. It's a weird because again, I was very mixed on Mickey 17, and yet I feel like Bong's still being a little too harsh to himself. But it was very interesting to see a director be very frank and honest out with the public about his own negative feelings and frustrations about a film of his. Rex Reed, the incredibly brash and outspoken film critic, has passed away at the age of 87. Reed was known for currying controversy as he belonged to that breed of critics who seemed to delight in coming up with the wittiest possible ways to tear apart a movie they disliked. The guy could certainly be entertaining. I once watched old clips of him running down the Oscar nominees from the Midnight Cowboy year, along with his dismissive attitude toward films from the Shape of Water year. And admittedly, some of his remarks made me both chuckle and gasp. I mean, he could be entertaining and funny to watch, and he clearly seemed to have this enjoyment of like really tearing into stuff. But I will admit, overall, Reed was not really my cup of tea personally. That style of criticism, where the critic seems more interested in having fun dunking on a movie and almost takes pride in their own sort of snobbery, that's always been the kind of film criticism that's been off-putting to me, and I think it can be alienating to general audiences as well. Um, you know, Ebert and Siskel, I certainly don't agree with all of their takes throughout time. I mean, Ebert had a thing against Godzilla movies, and everybody knows how much I love Godzilla movies. Siskel, I mean, made comments like claiming that the worst movie of the year were some of the most benign things. Movies that maybe the other people are mediocre, and he's acting like it's the worst thing he's ever seen. So, but even I never really felt like they got it off on tearing a movie apart. There's a fine line there. But look, regardless, Reed was undeniably a giant in the world of film criticism. And for a time, he was probably the most nationally recognized film critic out there before Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, exploded into the mainstream. So, yeah, he was not my style. He's not how I would advocate fellow film critics act like. But hey, the dude could write. The dude put film criticism on the map when he did. And, all I can say is rest in peace of Rex Reed. I wanted to highlight a wild article that I came upon from The Ankler, written by Deegan Penner. I hope I didn't butcher the man's name. About an epidemic of rats in the Los Angeles restaurant scene. And no, this is not a Ratatouille marketing stunt, guys. There's actually rats infesting many LA restaurants that many Hollywood types go to dinner at to pen out negotiations. And I'm gonna read from the piece here, and I'm gonna start kind of in the middle, and I won't necessarily try to finish the whole thing the rest of the way because I did want to give some I want to make sure that people actually go and read this, and on the show notes I'll leave a link to it. But if you check out the weekly digest, I've got a link up there too. But here it says right here, most of the restaurants that made news in regards to this rat infestation that's been going on in the LA restaurants. Most of the restaurants that made news were briefly shut down by the county, reopening within 2 or 3 days after addressing problems. At the peninsula, the issue wasn't rodents, according to General Manager Offer Nissenbaum, but insects. The roof garden kitchen was temporarily closed due to a discovery a small single-digit number of insects in an area that services our outdoor restaurant. Nissenbaum tells me it's important to note this was strictly limited to one area in all of our kitchens, and all areas of the hotel remain fully open, operational, and unaffected with A hygiene ratings achieved. Man, this dude would be losing his mind here in Florida. We got a lot of outdoor stuff here when it comes to restaurants. At St. Vincent Bungalows, where regular guests include stars like Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Aniston, and members include scores of top execs and creators, an event kitchen, separate from the main restaurant kitchen, was temporarily shuttered in April due to the presence of vermin. Says a spokesperson for the private members club. Our main kitchen, which serves all guests, was inspected the same day, was never cited, never closed, and continues to hold an A rating today. The club remained fully open, operating as usual throughout. However, according to Page Six Hollywood, the club has launched an internal probe with a possible reward of $10,000 into whether an employee planted a dead rat inside the premises. Well, this is getting interesting. You should do a movie about this. The spokesperson had no comment on the reported investigation. It just seems sort of inexplicable for a place like this as an SVB member who requested anonymity, adding that if in fact a staffer brought in the rat, it just feels like something out of a show like Palm Royale meets the new season of Beef. Whether these cases represent a genuine surge or merely a string of isolated incidents amplified in the thunderdome of social media is the subject of debate, and those on the front lines of the Los Angeles hospitality scene. Personally, I think there's always been an issue with rats in LA, but it's never been highlighted and socialized as much as it is right now, since a local restaurant publicist who doesn't want her name used adds a manager of a cafe in the Fairfax district who also requested anonymity. These things come in waves. One thing gets out and it kind of steamrolls and everything gets connected right away. Personally, I don't think it's a major issue. I wouldn't say rats in LA are necessarily any worse than any other major city. Well, I mean, he's got a point, but the problem is that people accept people expect a certain kind of high end restaurant experience in LA, especially these Hollywood types. I mean, look, I live in Florida. We will do freaking like outdoor restaurants with freaking fires blazing to try to keep the flies away. So what's behind, and this is a little bit later in the article. So what's behind the apparent increase? Climate change could be a culprit. Rat populations in 11 major cities around the world, including San Francisco, have gone up in tandem with rising temperatures, according to a report published in Science Advance in 2025. The journal's analysis theorizes that a growing number of warmer days creates more opportunities for rodents to find food and reproduce. LA wasn't included in the study because of a lack of systematic records of rat sightings. So, hey, there is that. According to wildlife experts and restaurant pros whom I spoke with, other factors that may play a role include trash accumulation across the city as Los Angeles struggles to provide basic services to residents, a string of wetter than average winters that have increased water availability and vegetation growth, and an increase in outdoor dining areas at restaurants that took off during COVID. Construction activity can also spike rat sightings as the disruptions can send them scurrying to find new homes. Developers broke ground on nearly 4,000 new apartment units in the first quarter of 2026, according to recent data from Colliers, the highest number since late 2022. Hey, I'm all for seeing some new housing in anywhere in the country, but especially in California. While the rats are making plenty of noise, the humans have gone remarkably quiet. Few in the restaurant business want to talk about rodent problems. I reached out to half a dozen publicists around town who work with restaurant clients to see if any owners or chefs would discuss the issue, or either declined or never responded, with one writing back. None of my clients will speak about rats, unfortunately, on or off the record. I also called two pest control companies, Western Exterminator and Rodent, requesting interviews about rats in LA, but no one from either business could be reached for comment. Someone from a third exterminator business, asking that their company not be named, wrote back, our restaurant customers requested that we not share their information, especially about having rodent issues. I can imagine. The reticence in is understandable, especially given the challenges local restaurants have suffered through in recent years, from ongoing inflation to the 2023 writers' strike and more. From the pandemic to the fires, everything is being thrown at these small businesses in terms of Hollywood-esque doomsday moments, says Seth Beard, the founder of the Instagram account Seth on the Scene, which covers restaurant openings and closings in and around West Hollywood. While hotspots like the St. Vincent Bungalows and Dan Tana's presumably won't see any permanent drop in customers. Indeed, two members of SVB tell me they've been there within the last few days, and the club was as packed as ever. Less busy businesses may suffer. For small mom and pop, a closure for vermin could just be crippling to their business, adds Beard. So, look, I thought this was a fascinating article, especially for anyone who's really into the LA scene. Again, this you can find this on the Ankler. The writer is Degan Penner. Again, I hope I didn't completely butcher the man's name. I did not go through the entire article. I highly recommend that you check it out. I'll leave it on the show notes. You can find it on on the weekly digest. But I'll tell you what, I think the last thing that Los Angeles needs right now, after all the stuff that they've been doing, and I mentioned an incredibly mediocre choices for governor in California. That California governor's race is a freaking mess, man. Um, but given all the things that California's been dealing with of late, I don't think Los Angeles residents, who already have all these other problems they're worrying about, uh, need to be dealing with rats in their restaurants. All right, when it comes to this past weekend at the box office, again, arguably the biggest film from this past weekend was Focus Features and Blumhouse's Obsession, a debut feature horror flick, again from Curry Barker, who, again, I will remind you, has no relation to Clive Barker. Again, trust me, I double checked. The movie was already a small hit at the fall festivals, but it's become an even bigger hit now that it's reached the wider public. And as you know, when I wrote what I'm reading from off here now, it had really good critical scores: 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, 77 on Metacritic. The audience scores 4.2 on Letterboxd, 8.2 on IMDb, 94% of the popcorn meter, and a rare for horror A minus cinema score. The movie did overperform a little bit at the box office, pulling in respectable mid-teen millions during its opening weekend for a film of its budget and size. As I mentioned earlier, sadly, I am not on the bandwagon with everybody else. I did not enjoy this as much as everybody else did. Um, but look, it is without a shadow of doubt the biggest a story of the box office this past weekend. Obsession, big hit with critics and audiences. Apparently, I'm the only guy who didn't like it. Also releasing this past weekend was the thriller Is God. It's also a debut drama for a director, Alicia Harris in this case. This movie, the premise is two sisters seek revenge on the father who burned and scarred their mother for life. This was beginning good word of mouth. 97% Rotten Tomatoes, 84 Metacritic. Audiences have responded well too. 3.7 on Letterboxd, 7.4 on IMDb, 89% of the popcorn meter, and a B plus cinema score. I have not gotten around to this one yet, but I definitely really hope to get to it around to it this week. I've been hearing good things about this one. Granted, I heard good things about Obsession. I didn't like that one, but I don't know. I feel like this one might be more up my alley. Meanwhile, as for Guy Ritchie's latest In the Gray, as I unfortunately expected, it is flopping at the box office. It's been met with negative critical reviews, 46% on Rotten Tomatoes, 52 on Metacritic. Mixed audience scores 3.0 on Letterboxd, 6.7 on IMDb, 82% of the popcorn meter, and just a B cinema score. Black Bear Pictures now 0 for 2 after what was supposed to be their big entry into distributing films rather than just producing them after last year's botched Christie Awards campaign. By the way, Christie, a movie that I enjoyed, but one that didn't go nowhere commercially or awards wise. I think like the best thing was that the Astros nominated Sydney Sweeney for actress in the drama side. Look, I will be catching In the Gray soon enough, but given Guy Ritchie's very mixed track record, I'd be surprised if this is at best more than just okay. But that was what happened during the box office, but it ended up being a very quiet week, dominated by a lot of mid-budget stuff and a new Guy Ritchie film. As for what to look forward to this upcoming weekend at the box office, we have a new event film and a new Star Wars entry in Star Wars The Mandalorian and Grogu, which has been tracking for a decent box office performance, though on the lower end compared to what these Star Wars movies typically are expected to do. I admittedly have not seen a single second of this show that the movie's following up on, but I am hoping for some adventure and fun, something that frankly, Star Wars has been lacking for me ever since Disney bought the property from George Lucas. Screenings for this one have been very limited, and I do wonder if that signals a lack of confidence from Disney in the product. But hey, we'll soon see where this ranks within the broader Star Wars filmography. We also will be getting, in terms of like any counter programming, we're going to be getting Boots Riley's sophomore film, I Love Boosters. About an operation of shoplifters boosting expensive clothes, comes from Neon following its premiere at South by Southwest. It was reportedly supposed to be Neon's plan B for awards contention in case something went horribly wrong for them at Cannes. Early word of mouth has been mostly along the lines of it's really good, but not as good as Boots' last movie. The trailers make this look like it could be a fun and wacky film with something to say, much like 2018 Sorry to Bother You was. I'm hoping for a fun time with this one when I get around to it. Black Bear Pictures will try to bounce back from In the Gray's box office failings with the Fall Festival hit Tuner, a small budget film starring Dustin Hoffman and up-and-comer Leah Woodall, who we got to see in the last Bridget Jones movie, in which a piano tuner learns he can use his listening skills to crack saves. This one has generated some great word of mouth, and I actually came very close to attending a screening for it, but unfortunately couldn't make it because I had to take care of the little woman that evening. Hopefully Black Bear can finally crack the code with this one in terms of generating good buzz for one of their films. Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan Ghost War, the film intended to wrap up the Amazon streaming series starring John Krasinski as the iconic American agent, will also be out this weekend by the streamer. And as most of you guys know, I am not really a TV guy, but I actually have been watching and catching up with this series, and honestly, I feel like it's lost steam quality-wise as it's going on, so I'm okay with finally wrapping this thing up. And in terms of straight to streaming releases, Netflix will have a new straight to streaming comedy in Ladies First, in which Sacha Baron Cohen stars as a man who wakes up in a world dominated by women, and this sounds like it will either be a really fun flick or a complete disaster. Let's hope for the former rather than the latter. In terms of anything else that's been on my mind that doesn't have anything to do with film, anyone catch that Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano fight on Netflix? I mean, that thing literally lasted just 16 seconds. There's already been speculation that the outcome was fixed or rigged, but hey, look, Dave Meltzer, who for folks who are not aware is a veteran combat sports journalist who kind of made his bones on writing pro wrestling news, but he's also covered mixed martial arts fighting. Dave Meltzer pointed out that if that was the case, that this thing had been rigged, Carano probably would have wanted to at least sell the idea that she could put up more of a fight than that. Look, I don't think there's any conspiracy here. Carano hasn't been in the ring in nearly 2 decades. Rousey has at least remained active through professional wrestling, which does still require a level of athleticism and conditioning. On top of that, Rousey used to win fights in exactly this kind of quick fashion before she began struggling towards the end of her UFC run. I actually remember being with a friend at Disney World when she finally lost, and he actually bet against her in that fight. So he made a pretty penny, and he was really excited when that happened. But there was a time when Ronda was just destroying people easily and making these embarrassing main event results where it'd be over in less than 30 seconds. Look, this is basically a fight between two athletes who are well past their primes. One who spent more time doing MAGA podcasts, who got rocked by the one who actually seemed locked in serious of the fight. I do think Ronda was pretty serious about the fight, whereas Gina, I don't know, I think she was just in for a quick paycheck, quite frankly. Ronda was too, but I do think Ronda wanted to actually win the fight. I mean, you tap out in 17 seconds, and I mean, the woman clearly was ready to get out of there as soon as possible. And yeah, I don't think this was rigged. I just think it was a pathetic, you know, display of what happens when you try to desperately go for some cheap ratings for the cheap ratings for watching two past their prime fighters against one another, quite frankly. Also, hey, the NBA finals apparently are going to be decided who's going to attend, because we got the conference finals. In the East, it's the Knicks and the Cavs, so the Pistons completely choke. And in the West, it's going to be the Thunder and the Spurs. I think we're probably headed towards a Knicks Thunder finals. Meanwhile, over in the NHL, the Hurricanes are waiting to see the winner of Game 7, which is happening as I record this. Literally, the Habs and the Sabres. Meanwhile, over in the West, it's going to be the Vegas Golden Knights against the Colorado Avalanche. Two teams have been fighting over the last couple of years to try to get back to the Stanley Cup after winning a cup a couple years ago, each of them. It'll be interesting to see which ones advance. But if I had to guess, I think whoever wins Habs and Sabres might be going up against the Avalanche. I think that might be what our Stanley Cup Finals matchup is, but we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I mean, again, I'm still annoyed that the Lightning aren't in the conversation, because I really do think they could still be in the conversation. And as for the Heat, don't even get me started on what a joke of organization we currently are. And that'll do it for this stacked episode of the Mendez Movie Report podcast. Remember, once again, that if you want to check out more of my work, you can visit mendezmoviereport.com or find me on all social media, whether it be Letterboxd, X, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, Reddit, or even Award Expert and Gold Derby under Mendez Movie RPT. Until next time, God bless, and do me a big favor, go watch a great movie for me.